3 is the future.
Welcome, crew, to What Are Your Three, a Channel 3 podcast where we take a member of the Channel 3 community, discuss 3 games of their choosing, go through some honorable mentions, and have a nice little video game discussion. But today, we're doing one of our developer chats. You've seen Harrowed World popping up on Channel 3 here and talking about Harrowed World and the various pieces of work tied to that. So we've got Alex Burton, who is the founder of Pennyvale Media, started in the United Kingdom primarily to act as the publisher of Harrowed World. And you've been doing that for 3 years now. But hey, we got Alex Burton on the podcast today. So hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's always fun when we make sure we align the times for, German, British episodes, things along those lines, and making sure it's like, oh, the West Coast people seem like they're more problematic. We always have an easier time scheduling European guests than we do people on the West Coast. They're always more finicky. So thanks for
funny how that works. That's quite all right.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk first of all. You've got projects tied to Steam, tied to itch.io, tied to itch.io. For those who are less familiar there, but you've got Harrowed Worlds. What's past is portents. Let me try that again. Harrowed Worlds. What's past is portents. That's a lot of S's for me to get out of my mouth in one sentence without screwing it up. So, first of all, just to let everybody know, this is a free base game. So, a visual novel you can come take a look at. And before I let you introduce the game, I'm going to just say, to warn people in advance, it's nice. They're bite-sized chunks, so you don't have to worry about having to do a 2-hour stretch and work it. Now they're broken out in chapters and little stories, almost like little novellas built in there. So it's wonderful. Thank you for not having to make this a 3-hour effort for a visual novel game. I appreciate that first and foremost. But hey, introduce yourself and we'll talk about the game.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate the pun with the bite size as well. So I'm Alex. I'm from the UK. I worked on the Harrowed World setting for about a little over a decade before I started using it in projects, and that sort of led me into doing video games. And the first thing we've released is Harrowed World: What's Past Is Portents, the free base game, as you said.
Yeah. So we will have quests for everybody as you're listening to this. You're going to see that popping up on Channel 3 when this drops here today. You've released the passes portents. You've also got some other packages tied to that. So you had portents in red. You've also got the story pack DLC coming up here too, right? So you got some more content tied to the world that's going to be coming as well to build upon it.
So the story pack DLC will be an extension of the What's Past Is Portents base game. So effectively, it would be the remaining stories, because the visual novel consists in totality of a series of short stories that don't seem initially directly connected, but they do lead into Harrowed World: Portents in Red. And they'll be released episodically. So when the story pack releases, there will just be one story. That's Duncan's story. But then we will release the remaining stories episodically at no extra cost to the player. And then, as I mentioned, Harrowed World: Portents in Red. That's a modern Gothic vampire RPG. And basically, it's in a modern setting. It's Gothic. You play a vampire. And it's all about these mysterious portents in red, as the title would suggest. And, you've just been turned. You're getting used to this new vampire society. You're trying to work out what's going on. And the way What's Past Is Portents works is it introduces you to the sort of important characters who act as protagonists for these stories, and also the various factions make up the vampire's world, as it were. And then, so it's sort of all, those both sort of fit together quite well, I think.
So you mentioned, I wanted to double click on, this has been kind of cooking in your head and notes and various things for a decade now, which makes sense, as there's kind of a a built out complete world beyond just saying like, okay, we have, we know what vampire lore is. You've got characters, you've got intertwined, you've got locations, you've got just kind of like beyond just the vibe and the feel. There's clearly a world tied together with this. So what prompted, what started that? As much as I'm sure we'll discuss some of that when we talk about some of your games you have highlighted to chat about. But what prompted you to say, let me start cooking something up here.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So it is quite it's I like to think it's a full developed setting. There isn't just vampires in it either, but that's sort of what I'm on for the video games to start with. There are various other supernatural creatures. Um but actually when I was younger, I wasn't never massively into the supernatural initially. But that sort of interest came later, and when I started to develop this interest, and I sort of thought, well, why don't I give a go at making my own setting? It started off quite rough initially. I've seen some of my initial notes that are honestly quite embarrassing, but as I've developed and gotten a real understanding of what I wanted from the setting, I've sort of I've sort of improved that, and as I went along, my notes are insane that wouldn't make it understand to any other human being, but I understand them sort of, just
the
enough.
important part is you have them, and they're not just randomly found by somebody in notebooks collected anywhere with no context. No, this is work. This is
Yeah.
This is not the random scribblings of a madman. That's the important part.
Well, they might be, but yeah.
But
At
you've
least I
created
understand
something
them.
with it. That's the important part. Yes.
Yeah. So, and one of the games that I mentioned actually was a big inspiration for me initially, which was Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which we'll talk about later. That's sort of one of the reasons I chose that game. Also, you're looking at vampire games, particularly gothic vampire games. Yeah, even more particular RPGs. There isn't a massive choice to come from, if we're honest. So it just made logical sense to me to pick that one.
So, artistically speaking, you've kind of built this entire world out, and there's it just screams the gothic feel to it while you're playing it, while you're looking at it. How did you decide on the art style, visually speaking, which I think was important, but also the music in the background, the audio that's kind of, it's all coming together. And if you're playing, I opted for playing this in the basement, turning the lights off, and just kind of living with it. And I think I recommend for anybody who could do that, yeah, listen, turn the lights off, enjoy, and kind of, it lets you drink it in a little bit more. But you really tied everything together. I think even from a forgive me, I saw in the credits who your narrator was while I was playing Isaac's introduction section there. But I think it all kind of really comes together when you have the art style, and I'm trying to go for like a gothic oil painting type of a feel or something along those lines. I'm a moron who claps two rocks together, so forgive me if I misinterpreted what that art style looks like. But you have that. Okay. You got the music, and you've got a narrator that, like, all three pieces come together and really kind of bring you into the world. How did you manage to balance all of that to get that feel?
So it is, it's difficult, and you have doubts, like with the narrator. And I thought, yeah, this guy's fantastic. He's done a fantastic job. And then I have this doubt in my head. It's like, do I know what sounds good? You've got all these things that you've got to balance, and you're working with, even with like a small project like this, I'm working with other people, and so they've got to get it for it to all come together. And I've had the privilege of working,
and get what's in your head and your notes too. Like they don't have the mental vision you do of things, but they also don't necessarily have like every piece coming together. So you're trying to piece these things together with different people with different specialties too. That's the funny part.
Yeah. And when it actually comes to the art style, so I had the privilege of working with a very talented developer as well. We were both working together on Portents in Red. He likes to be known as Maha. And we were discussing the What's Past is Portents, the base game. I was just saying, well, I'm going to need to get an artist, and he was very keen to give it a go. And he didn't really have that much experience with that sort of thing, but he wanted to give it a go, and he did a fantastic job. He just really gets the sort of the vision. He's just so good at that, and he done this art with not really any experience. And I had to keep reminding how good it is. I didn't really believe it, but it's incredible artwork that he put together without really any experience.
So, like, did you give him the script and he just kind of visualized? Or are you sharing? Like, I'm picturing. Do you have like visual inspirations you were working off of? Like, how do you communicate that to somebody? Because you've got the vision in your head, and you've got somebody else who. And it's funny hearing they had limited experience. I would have never guessed that. For sure, but like you're communicating somebody who on top of things has a limited experience. Like, how do you get the image out of your head and into someone else's hand to generate it?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult, and sometimes you won't always get it right, at least not initially. I think we've really gotten a good understanding from working together. We sort of get each other, and so that does help. But it takes time to perfect that. Generally, I would describe the things that I wanted. So these would be things like backgrounds, characters, and then I would, particularly with the backgrounds, I would look for references in a lot of cases. This is the sort of thing, don't copy it exactly, but this is sort of the
vibe.
thing.
Yeah.
The vibe, yeah. So, and it's like you partly, but it is always difficult because it's almost like you are sort of, there is gothic architecture in the world, but it's not. The real world isn't quite as gothic as Harrowed World, so you are sort of you're trying your best with what you've got.
Yeah, you want to heighten it.
Yeah. And sometimes, you look at, other projects that come before, and there are some good examples, but also there isn't a lot of examples. So there isn't actually a lot of good examples of Gothic vampire games. And unfortunately, a lot of ones that that were in development never actually saw the light of day. So you've got these scraps of these ideas and these concept art for things that didn't necessarily come out. These are things from big companies or from small developers that just never came out. And stuff that's actually come out and is playable is actually quite small. So it is quite limited what you can draw inspiration from. So you've got to sometimes widen it a little bit and try and look around to see what you can find.
So the other big piece that you did not do your own audio music scoring for the game either. So that's something else that you had to, like, scripting. Hey, listen, you can write, you can script. I think that you see you feel the 10 years, you feel the depth in that, and I feel like that might have been not the easiest part to get out, since it took you a decade, right? Like you're trying to deal with your own like combating and trying to get everything perfect and just right and balancing all that, but then like you also have the audio to get out there.
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
Yeah. So again, I have the privilege of working with a very talented composer. He's called Stefan. He initially started doing some music for Portents in Red. And so he's already done actually a bunch of tracks for Portents in Red, many of which people haven't heard yet, but sound amazing. But you'll have to wait and see for those. But then, it seemed logical to ask him to do the music for What's Past is Portents, because he really got the style I was after. And then it also sort of almost fits it more together, because it, as I say, just sort of as a prelude to Portents in Red. So for that, I sort of looked at music that sort of got the style, the vibe that I was after. That this is the sort of thing. Again, obviously, don't copy this, but even more particularly with music. But yeah, this is the sort of thing. And then
You
I
want to
sort of,
evoke a feeling, right? Like that's like
yeah,
I can't figure out how to tell somebody. Here's what I want to feel. They got to figure out what that,
yeah,
how to make
yeah,
that
yeah,
audio transfer into audio. Yeah.
yeah. So I'd often talk about so I'd often with the visual novels, so what's past is put on, I'd often send recordings of of the story or bits of the story. So that would often the music's often done last. It has been so far anyway for what's past is important. So I'd send that over and say, well, this is the story, and then sort of leave them to it. When it comes to Portents in Red, we sort of have a bit more of a discussion about the music. So it's things like music for different factions. So they have their own sort of bases of operations. This is where it is. This is what they're all about. Sort of invoke those ideas of what that faction's all about. But yeah, it's I think Stefan's got a really good idea of what I'm after now. So and it's really good to work with.
So the second thing I want to say, because I want to talk about Portents in Red a little bit and kind of what's building with the RPG side of things, but I've got my hands on the visual novel side of things too, and getting the feel for the world. So I do want to ask about that. One more thing I want to ask is just, structurally speaking, you never know with a visual novel, right? There's things with visual novels as a medium, they can be just that. They're a novel, which means you start on page 1 and you finish on page whatever it ends on. Yours is not the case. You've got a little bit more of a choose your own adventure vibe to it, that you've got multiple paths you can take, which can be challenging or complicated, narratively speaking. And by narratively, I mean, one, from a programming perspective, two, just trying to build upon it. And every branch you create, like, okay, what's going to happen here, technically speaking, which can be its own kind of fun challenge and things, right? And then, but also just like, how do you tie it back together? Because there's points where, like, okay, you see where it loops back in, and there's others that branch off and kind of do their own thing. And just kind of curious, like, how do you tie all that together? Because you took the better route, as far as I'm concerned, for visual novels, because you do give a little bit of wiggle room to see what's going to happen here.
Yeah. So there is a slight complication with what's past is Portents and both the base game and the DLC stories, in that they sort of need a predetermined destination, because these are characters that will appear in Portents in Red. They need to get to a place where Portents in Red can happen. They need to be. So that does limit me slightly. But, when I originally conceived the idea for the visual novel, I thought it's just going to be a story without any choices. And then I thought about it, and I thought, that's not very much fun, is it? So
we got to when you're building in, like, because you're building as a teaser for an RPG, which is an extra, not complicate. I don't mean to say complication in a negative way, but like, you're giving yourself an extra challenge with that. You're not making things easier on yourself when you decide that's going to be the case, because you want an RPG to, okay, you're role playing. You want to make the story your own.
Yeah. So
you're taking a medium that often ends up going in unilaterally, and you're trying to give it a little spice.
Yeah. So and it's interesting how there's so many ways that it differs from most visual novels, and I just seem to choose all the options to make it different. It just seems to be just how
you choose the options to make it difficult, but these are different. Okay, but again, like, that's difficult for you, but more interesting for everybody else, I guess.
Yeah. So, because a lot of visual novels are like one long story, as you mentioned before, and this is more like lots of different little stories that are connected by purpose. So, each story is obviously much shorter than a sort of long visual novel, but they all have different characters, different locations. So you've basically got to come up from scratch each time. But to answer your initial question, because I think I've gone off it a bit, It's about the choices. So yeah, so with that, with Isaac's story, which is the story in the base game, I didn't really have a plan for that. I sort of winged it. So basically, in the end, I determined that most of the, and then again, it links to all the achievements as well, of course. So a lot of it comes in sort of the sort of second half of the story, and it's all about. You're basically rewarded for asking questions. Your curiosity is rewarded with achievements. You want to know more about what's going on, well, you're more likely to get an achievement. That was sort of the thinking for that, and then it was just the rest of it was just what can be a bit fun. So, and how can we do this a bit different? And I just thought I thought it would be quite funny if you've just started and then you have an option where you can just die. And I thought that would be fun. And then you get an achievement for being stupid. What's great about that, in my opinion, anyways, it sort of gives you a hint that maybe you shouldn't stay.
It tries to warn you away from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do it anyway, and then you die. Of course. So yes, you get those game overs, which aren't canon, but they're fun. The way it's the canon ending is when it has the credits.
Nailed it. I nailed it. I got through it. That's all that mattered. Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah. So once you're sort of in the final bit, there's a few different ways you can get to those credits, that final ending, and then of course you got the epilogue after that, which sort of is to round it up. I came up with the epilogue
it felt like it was teasing more. That's at the end.
Yeah.
After the credits. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually added the epilogue later. So when it originally released, there was no narrator, so no voice acting. And I decided to add that later. And then I also decided to add the epilogue because there was a bit of ambiguity on the ending, what happens to Isaac. And that's obviously quite important because he's going to be an important character in Portents in Red. So I sort of added that just to explain it. Basically, it's so that's why I did that.
Yeah. But you get to you tease throughout, you kind of weave it and bring it back together. So
yeah,
that's how you wanted it to work. So let me ask. So with Portents in Red, do we have a status update with that, or what's kind of the runway looking like for that? Because you're building towards that as much as you've got the visual novel tying in and creating the world and giving the vibe. You're building towards something seems to be a lot bigger, a lot more ambitious, and that can be challenging at the same time too, in and of itself. But what should we be on the lookout with Portents in Red?
It's a proof that I might be insane. Just how big it is. It's very ambitious, and that's sort of why we decided to do What's Past as Portents, because then it's something to sort of whet people's appetite before it introduces these things, these concepts, these factions, these characters in a more sort of a more gradual pace, and also just gives us a bit more time to work on Portents in Red, which obviously is a lot bigger project. So right now we're working on sort of the models, the systems to make it all work. The story itself most of it is planned out. I have very good idea of how I want it to start, how I want it to end, and quite a good idea of the things that happen in between. So sort of the main storyline. I want to have a lot of RPGs would traditionally call them side quests. We're going to call them tasks rather than quests. Sort of lots of side things you can do besides the main story. But yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. And ideally, at some point, we might be looking at maybe doing a Kickstarter or some other crowdfunding just to help with that development and maybe bring a few more people on board, because it's basically just me and another developer. And thankfully, the other developer is very talented. But it is quite hard. There is just two of us working, and we are basically working on 2 games at the same time.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just jump in here and say we'll talk about it with your first game, but you want to talk about development cycles for challenging development. You're in a challenging development genre. It feels like it is one with a storied history of the developing cycle can be challenging for sure. But again, you're building the hype though. You're building everything up. That's the important part.
Yeah, but I always knew it was going to be difficult, but sometimes that makes it all the more sweet when you achieve it. And it's very much the game. Potency Red is very much the game I really want to make. So we're going to have to make it, even if it takes a bit.
The last thing I want to bring up, so you've got a little bit of a long-term plan too, right? You've got book ideas, you've got Dracula Fallen longer term, I think is really what it comes down to. So this is not, there are people come along and they're trying to put something together. You've got, like I said, you've had a decade of a world building in your head that you're trying to get out there too. So you've really kind of got everything in the works here, but you want to touch on that?
Yeah. So I've got lots of ideas, lots of plans. Yeah, so I'm looking at completing Wormwood Rising, which is a short story, not a game, just fiction, which would sort of introduce readers to the magical folk of Harrowed world as opposed to vampires.
Excellent. Well, we've teased. I love talking with developers too, about some of the games that we always talk 3 games, and usually ends up there being some inspiration or something from the used thing along those lines. And I think we've got a bit of both here for you. That we've got some past, we got some inspiration. We've got one utterly ridiculous one that I can't really talk about either. But
always get a ridiculous one.
But we kind of teased talking about obviously Vampire the Masquerade and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines being an inspiration for many a vampire games since then, but this one came out 21 years ago now, I painfully say. But it was a game. The funny thing is I hadn't realized that this thing, I knew it was, it's a cult game, right? We'll say that. I don't mean like it's a game about the occult. Yes, it is technically, but I mean the thing kind of got first of all, it had a very rough development cycle, as I teased earlier here, but the thing sold fewer than 80,000 copies, but has been carrying on, one with the RPG that is Vampire the Masquerade itself that carries on, but 2, there's I'll talk about the other side with they're still working on a sequel that we may actually even see this year, apparently. It also has its own terrifying development cycle too, but that's a separate story for another day. But you wanted to, I said, well, let's talk 3 games, and the first one you said was Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, all of its 21 years of age at this point.
Yeah, it's a funny one, and they are working on a sequel, and I have opinions.
We're all going to find again. We may even be able to share those opinions in 2 months. Who knows? I was like, wait, they actually put a date on it? I didn't realize that. Oh God.
Yeah, they put a month on it. I don't think they've put.
That's true. Yes, I did not see an actual date. They said October of 2025 at this point, which is it's closer. It's closer.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Well, Well, when I actually started working on Potency Red initially, I was under the impression that Bloodlines 2 was not going to release because there was like a big period of time where there was nothing.
Well, it changed developers. Like they completely, I don't know if they completely scrapped it or they transferred, but it went to a new developer. That's so that's when he says I don't know if it's gonna happen. No, it changed developers altogether. It was in the wasteland. So
so that was a crazy thing. But when you I'm not going to say too much about the sequel, but the original has quite a important place in my heart because it was. And actually, when you learn more about the development and the problems the studio had, which was Trocchia Games, it sort of gives you a greater understanding and appreciation for how good the game is. They had so many problems during development. They were forced to use this game engine that wasn't finished. They kept having to update it. So every time they updated the thing, they basically had to start things from scratch. And then they made them release it. The publisher, so that would be Activision, decided to release it at the same time as Half-Life 2, which was basically the nail in the coffin. Like, the
Let's
hotly
get the PC
anticipated
players
sequel.
into this. No, they're gone now. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and they had all these problems, and they were trying to. But like, when you look at other games from around that time, it looks really good, despite the problems. And there are places where it looks a bit unfinished because it is. But there's a real there's a great atmosphere to it, and it's something that is rarely it's not really been replicated.
For
There's a
21,
lot of,
again, for more than 2 decades. That's like,
yeah,
again, it was ambitious too, because like you're taking a role-playing game, not like the Final Fantasy sense, but you're taking a game where like, no, people do this IRL, if you will, and this is not to call it a tabletop, but like, no, this is something you do more of a I wouldn't even compare it to Dungeons and Dragons, because frankly the events and things that have occurred around Vampire the Masquerade, like I've heard of elaborate things where like they've rented out basically an entire hotel to to play, or like an entire warehouse to, no, you come in and there's 150 people at this event and they are living out a fully orchestrated multi-floor event. So like you're talking about something that's pretty ambitious here to try to go after. And they were trying to capture as much of it as they possibly could too. Like they weren't going to be like, oh, we're going to make a game and just call it Vampire the Masquerade. Like, no, they wanted to capture as much of the spirit of it as they could too.
Yeah. I think they did a good job with what they were working with. You know, the lore of Vampire the Masquerade is quite expansive. Sometimes a bit messy. I don't think that's unfair to say. It's had a long development and lots of things they've had lots of material written for it. But they took all the best parts of it and they brought it to life. And that was and they made this game with this amazing atmosphere that again hasn't been replicated since. So that was a big inspiration on me. And so I wanted to do something not exactly the same, but with there's obviously going to be similarities. It's inevitable. You take inspiration from the things that have gone before. Everyone does. And so there'll be so with my work, there'll be similarities, but there'll always be differences. And because I have my own taste, my own opinions, I don't just want to replicate what they've already done. I want to do something slightly different. It might well appeal to the same people who enjoyed Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, but may appeal to other people as well. But yeah, it's a very important game for me. It hasn't always aged well in all aspects, but as you say, it's like 21 years old, or however old it is. It was 2004, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh.
So it's not always going to have aged well in all aspects, but there's still, there are games that are made now that don't measure up to that. So,
lots now, yes.
Yes. So, I don't think it's unfair to, it's a classic. It's, as you say, it's a cult classic, and there was a lot of heart in the development which comes through, and it's just real unfortunate the studio went down so soon after the release.
When did you find your way into the actual game itself?
I would have been too young to play it when it released, which you might have guessed.
Again, I'm not to make assumptions or anything, but I kind of figured you weren't playing this one then. No judgment towards your parents. I mean, maybe you were.
Yeah.
but when did you end up in it though?
I would have been sort of mid to late teens. I would have found it, and I sort of heard things about it, and I thought, why don't I give it a go?
It's there. Let me check it out. Was this like a Steam? Let me go check it out on Steam type of thing.
Yeah, and then you get it on Steam and realize it doesn't work, and then you panic and have to find out how to make it work because it doesn't play on modern machines without the unofficial patch that isn't included on the Steam version.
Yeah,
so
make it interesting.
Yeah, so that's fun to find out. A few negative reviews they've gotten on there because of that. Well, kind of understand that, but yeah. But I suppose it's in a weird place because the developer doesn't exist anymore. It's just being put on there, presumably by the publisher, who probably don't really have anything to do with it.
Activision just gets a check once in a while.
Yeah.
What else is new for them? They need to go buy and close another studio, I guess. Oh shoot, I should not have said that part. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. So did you dabble in any of the Vampire the Masquerade outside of the game, out of curiosity?
Not really, because I've not really heard of it out. So
it is culty in and of itself. Yes, it is. It's one of those things like you got to find the culture somewhere. Like the whole theme of it is you're hiding the vampire culture in modern times, and like they kind of hide the players in modern times too. But there is a weird underground cult of it that exists. That's the funny part. It's just a matter of like finding it.
Yeah, well, once you know it exists, you can find them. But I've never actually met someone in person who really knows about it. So I only found out about it through the internet, basically. And I thought, well, it looks interesting, so I give it. And it is that sort of that idea that's quite unique, that vampires and other creatures can exist secretly among humanity in sort of the modern day. And I thought that was a really cool idea, and that's sort of what I've run with. Because that's such an interesting but basic idea. You can do things with that, of course. But that basic idea, more so than actually the lore itself, just that basic idea was really fascinating.
You have a second game in the vampire realm of Vampire, and this one at least a little newer, 2018. Though I was as I was like, that was only a couple years. Oh, that was 7 years ago now. Never mind. Oh, that stung when I realized that. But this is Don't Nod's action RPG where you're playing a newly turned vampire. In some older times. Yeah. But they give the element that you were a doctor and you're dealing with. I think this one's got a little bit. It's got an interesting narrative, right? Because you're a doctor, you're suddenly thrust into this underground of, to your point, the occult, the mythology, werewolves, all sorts of mythological creatures that are underlying there. But so, what made you bring this one up?
Well, again, there isn't many vampire games you can really pull off, particularly vampire RPGs. This one, I thought there's lots I could say about it. I thought that would be a good reason to suggest it. So, there's I quite like. There's definitely ambition there, which I like. I think it's different to say Bloodlines in that you have a predetermined character. This is who you play. This is who they are. This is their history, etc. And I do like the historical setting. I kind of wish it was Victorian, but it's quite nice anyway. It's nice. It's quite an interesting period of history because it's right after, I think it's the First World War, and it's during the Spanish flu epidemic, which is a real point in history where actually more people died from the epidemic than did the war. And it's sort of in this sort of alternative version of those events, which I think is quite an interesting way to go with it. And, I quite like the story. There's lots of interesting things you can go with the idea. You're fighting between the Hippocratic Oath and being a vampire. That's quite interesting. I think what I take away from it is that it struggles with its identity, and I think this is partly to do with because you. How do I word this? When you're dealing with big
game
companies,
of it at the same time, is that the piece you're touching on there?
So like you have these big companies, and they'll be like, "Well, this is doing well, so we've got to do this." And I get that a lot from Vampire. Like, so on one hand, it's trying to be this sort of atmospheric, interesting story about being a vampire. You're going to make these choices, which is really interesting. And on the other hand, you've got this sort of almost Souls-like thing going on.
The action side of the action RPG.
Yeah. I don't mind there being action, because obviously there's action in Bloodlines.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think they merge it slightly better in Bloodlines. I think it fits more the story in a lot of cases. Whereas in Vampire, it almost feels like you're just killing people for no reason. Like, these people are just here and they want to kill me. I don't know who they are or why they're doing it, but they're here.
It just kind of you just kind of zoom out into a battle sequence too. That's the thing. Like, you have
basically,
you have like these intimate scenes and like quiet retrospective, and like you said, your characters dealing with the philosophical issues at hand. And so, like, no, we're gonna zoom out and you're gonna go battle this like 4 people that are coming at you all of a sudden.
Yeah. And then you go rest to maybe upgrade or whatever, and the person you've just killed has respawned. Great. What was the point of killing them? They're right there again. This really is Dark Souls. What was the? I would have much preferred, even if they'd had all those enemies in place, if they didn't respawn, because now they're not real people.
You also have the that was my problem when they remade The Last of Us Part 2 and they added the like roguelike element. I'm like, oh, it's a game about like not wanting to kill people. Like, oh, here's an endless killing people section of the thing. I'm like, you guys kind of lost the thread you created here. With this one too. And like, what's the point of having your character, trying to deal with the impact of like, oh, now I've got to start killing all these people when I swore my life to doing no harm. Like, oh, no, they're back anyway. It's all good.
Yeah. So like, part of me thinks maybe they sort of start to run out of time, but part of me also thinks like somebody went, well, Dark Souls is popular, so we better do that. And it just, to me, it feels it doesn't quite work, but maybe that's just my opinion. And I've seen some reviews that, quite a few reviews where people go, well, the Souls-like combat isn't even very good Souls-like combat. But I'm not really a fan of Souls-like anyway, so I don't really know if it's a good iteration of that, but I have heard opinions that it's not. But it's just I just think the identity is a bit confused. I mean, obviously action would take a part of it, which makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. I just would prefer if it was more integrated to the story, like it made more sense. It just sort of brings me out of it when there's just random enemies all the time for no reason, or when they respawn and things like that. But the story is interesting. Some good music to it. I like that you can feed during combat. That's a good innovation that it does bring. I have mixed feelings about the fact you have to kill every time you feed. But I suppose that goes back to the curse be the choice element, which is the whole tagline. So there's some logic to that decision as well.
Your third game you brought up, and again, the game I've been teasing is just the most ridiculous of the 3. I want to say last year's Cult of the Lamb, but apparently this was 3 years now. This is just dumb. Time is dumb. Is all I'm getting out of the games you brought up today. But
it might say more about me than time, but yeah.
No, only because it feels like it was just like, oh, I was only playing this a couple of months ago. No, it was 3 years ago. But we've got a roguelike here now in the mix with the widest of gaps between its character design and its theme, where you are a lamb saved by a demigod, god, something along those lines. So it's something of high power that says, hey, you got to make a cult for me now, and you have to build followers and sacrifice them, and go do roguelike runs to build up your camp and your cult and everything else along the way. So, but yeah, anyway, that's where we're at. So what? All right. So we're straying. We're straying a little bit from your other 2 games.
A little bit.
So go on, please tell me.
Well, I thought, I was trying to think what's a good more mainstream option that doesn't delve too far, because it's still supernatural and things. It's not vampires, but it's demons and monsters and things. And I thought, well, Cult of the Lamb. And the genius of Cult of the Lamb, because it is genius, and it's not the style that I go with, obviously, but there is a genius to it, where you do with these themes that are quite dark and quite occult, as you say, but you put it in a style where you can get away with more things and get a lower age rating. So, and it's like like when you play it, you sometimes forget what you're actually playing. And then, like, it was like when the first time so you can harvest your followers for meat. The first time I did that, and it's like, oh, this is quite detailed for the style. Like,
You know, until you said that, I didn't realize that game was a teen rated game by the ESRB. I don't know what the rating is over there with, but oh my god, I didn't realize this was I always just assumed it was an M rated game. But oh, go on, sorry, that distracted me. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Oh my god.
Yeah, so it's a 12 over here. So a lot of games that are teen over there are 12 over here.
Yeah,
the age ratings tend to line up quite well when it comes to games. They just have slightly different names.
Movie ratings get weirder between Britain and America, but yes,
yeah.
but the game ratings are at least in line here.
Yeah, I think the way the movie ratings get weird is because Britain, the UK has a 15, whereas the US doesn't really have a 15 equivalent. So basically, all the movies that would be a 15 or 18 here are like a
we have the
like
PG-13 and the R, and there's and you've got hard lines on some of yours. Like no, the 18 means 18. Not,
yeah. So but it lines up quite well with the game.
But Call to the Lamb is T anyway, T or 12 depending on where you're at. That's what I never realized that.
Yeah.
You're dealing with feces everywhere. You're dealing with just like sacrificial ceremonies. Like no, I'm just gonna jam a knife and like you said, harvest this. This one's getting a little older, a little sick. Let's go. Is this the one I'm going to sacrifice? We're going to sacrifice the young, healthy one that's getting a little sassy, getting out of line, and questioning whether I'm in charge or whether they should be giving this worship and all that. Who am I going to sacrifice this time?
Yeah, like you cutting them up, and like this is quite dark, and this is like this is a teen, this is a 12 game, and you're cutting them up, and it is. For the art style, it's quite dark. What you're doing, it's quite.
Oh yeah, they're happy-go-lucky little cartoon creatures. Yeah, the art style is the funniest part.
Yeah,
you change the art style, and the game goes immediately to an Amber 18 or whatever. So
yeah, if I made this game Cult of the Lamb in my style, it would be an 18. So that's just, but it is this element of genius to that. But then you have things like, and then you have basically cannibalism. Because you can feed the meat to their followers. Okay, they are animals, but they're basically people. So it's basically cannibalism. And then of course you got the things. Feces stuff is weird though. You just get some. You just want to eat feces. It's like why? It's gonna make you sick.
I got the boon that gives me the benefits for it, so I'm going after. Yeah,
it's weird, and then. Yeah, that's a bit weird. I never quite got that part, but yeah, and it's funny because it obviously has these dungeons that it disguises quite well as trying to as not dungeons, but they are dungeons in a gameplay development sort of stance. And I actually quite enjoy those, which is quite strange because I always didn't like dungeons, like dungeon style games. But I quite like Cult of the Lamb. It masks it quite well, and it's quite varied. It mixes it up.
Yeah, you get those roguelike elements of like, okay, what weapons am I getting on this run? How do I stack? How do I combine? Yeah, you're trying to figure out like what are the pieces you want to make work, or like what's it sending me up against now? That always for the well done ones works well. For the ones where they didn't really think entirely through what that looks like, it makes it annoying, boring, and makes you feel like you're praying to the RNG gods for the random number generator to give you something helpful. But it feels like they thought this one through.
Yeah, and it's interesting to say. Now, I've just made me think of if you compare it to like Hitman Freelancer, which is the new roguelike mode for Hitman. I think they call it World of Assassination.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. The Hitman Freelancer is really frustrating to play for me because, to be honest, I was never that good at Hitman anyway, and I had all these like crutches I could rely on to sort of get me through it, including reloading. So if you die, and then those are all gone, and like you lose everything, and it's like at least with Cult of the Lamb, you don't lose every single thing you've done when you die.
I never messed with that Hitman one because I felt like there was going to be some money grab element to that I didn't want to get involved with. So
there wasn't really a money grab element. It was just like but it is just reusing the same maps again.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I want the thing with Hitman. I want they keep using the same maps, and it's like, give me new maps. I want new maps. That's what I want from you. I don't want the same map 50 million times. Which, there were complications with. I don't know. I know they had some difficulties. I think around the development of Hitman 2. So, yeah. But whatever, that's just my opinion. And then,
now they're doing Bond, so they're going the rest of the way now. So
yeah, going the rest of the way. That's that was an interesting announcement when I saw that, and it's like, yeah, well, I think something new with James Bond is what you need, whether that's in video games or movies.
Yeah, we've been chasing that GoldenEye high in video games for
like
and what started with I liked a couple of the Craig Bonds in particular, not to go to the movie chat too much, but now we're through the dark and gritty era. Let's see what we could bring up new here.
Yeah, I mean, making him James Bond younger is something different. And it needs something different. Will it work? I don't know, but it's worth a go.
Now it's an entirely different control because they found out the exact amount of money the Broccoli's needed to say, "Cool, we're out."
Yeah.
Who knew? Yeah. Who knew that dollar figure existed? So here we are.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
Well, Cult of the Lamb, go check it out, especially since it's rated teen. I sit here with a 12-year-old. I'm like, I don't know how I would explain this game to my son. I don't know how I would explain this because I never thought I would have to. But oh god.
It's crazy, isn't it? But it must be the art style, because what else could it explain that age rating?
Well, because it has, like you said, it has like the blood, it has everything. Like no, they just because they made it a little cartoony. I guess it's all good.
Yeah. And maybe because he made them animals, but we're still treated as people. They're basically people.
There's people a lot of with the religion faces. And cult elements of explaining all that. I don't know. Anyway. Well, hey, we've reached a point where we take a quest or a question from the Channel 3 history books, just a quick little something to have fun with. And I just want to ask you, what's the game you have the most hours logged in?
Hours logged in, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
How much time do you think you spent on that?
So it's funny because Steam logs the time you're in games, but because there's various mods with Bloodlines that I've played, due to the way the mod launcher works, it only counts sort of the base game hours. So it could actually be a lot more than it actually says on Steam because it doesn't go through Steam for the mod launcher. So, but I'll tell you what it says on Steam, and this is my highest hours listed. I'll get it up. It's 586.8 hours. So, yeah. So
you knew you meant it.
Yeah, is any surprise I'm making a vampire RPG? I want to make a new game that captures that feeling, but a more modern game because obviously it's over 20 years ago, and it is of my opinion that the sequel won't do that, but that's just my opinion. But it'd be a different lore anyway.
We may or may not see. We'll see.
We may or may not see. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. People might love it. I don't know. It's just what I've seen, and that's totally an unbiased opinion. It may seem like a biased opinion. It's not. It's just from what I've seen from it.
Well, again, I mentioned we're gonna wind things down here. This is not my normal spot. Normally, my co-host is here, but he's not here for the daytime recording, so I've got to land this plane. But the first thing I will do, let everybody know, you'll see some quests that have dropped related to Harrowed World. So we'll have, wish listing, portents in red, going and playing. What's past as portents as a part of this. So you'll have some activities for everybody to go do. Go check that out. But Alex has everything set up at Harrowed World on Channel 3. So you've got the links to everything are on his page there. So just go to channel3.gg/Harrowed World, and you'll see everything you need to go find all things Harrowed World. The links to the itch.io, the links to Steam. Again, we'll have the quests that are there for it. So you will have all things tied to what Alex has been putting together here. And go play it, because that'll be one of the activities to go do. Go play what's past as portents. But I will wind things down then and say, just remind you, c3.gg/Harrowed Harrowed World or channel3.gg/Harrowed World will get you to Alex's page there. Podcast, c3.gg/podcast. You'll find us there. Wednesdays, 3:33 a.m. in the morning. All the majors, YouTube Music, Apple. Someone pointed out we're on Audible. Like we got Audible out there, but our home's on Spotify. We're on places I've never even heard of. I'm Dan. Ray would be with me otherwise. Joel Willis, executive producing, and shout out to Caster Garden for our theme song. Go check out his quest too, because he just dropped his first full album. So Caster Garden's got an album out there. Go check it out, people. But have a good day, everyone.
Channel 3 is the future.